Hello everyone and welcome to SkShadow. Welcome back to another F1 2020 episode. So this time we are going to Belgium, and that is for the Grand Prix in Spa, which is perhaps one of the better tracks, certainly one of my favourite, and I'm sure one of the, fan favourites. People do love that track, but to begin with, we do have something very, very important to do. We need to change our teammate. Yep, I've decided we are doing it. We have 10 mil in the bank, so we can get a fair few drivers. So just look through, looking at who I can go for. So initially, I decided to go for Lando Norris, and I approach him. But he actually rejects our approach because we don't have Spec 1 on the personnel. So yeah, our approach for him didn't work. We tried signs. But he also said no due to the chassis not being Spec 1. So in the end, I went for Lance Stroll, who did accept us because he wanted Spec 1 durability, which we actually did have, which was good. So that then initiated a bidding war with Racing Point to see who's going to get him. So we started negotiations with a balance of 7.88 million after paying his buyout clause. And we pretty much just put in a few small bids. And they bidded once, and then we bid the second time, and then that's it. So clearly Lance's dad doesn't like him anymore because he didn't sign him. He really didn't fight very hard to keep his son there. But we now have Lance Stroll as our teammate. So we've spent a fair amount of money on him. So I'm very much hoping that we do get some decent performance out of him. But we do have 2.7 mil left, which means we can get an upgrade. So I go for the quality control in the chassis, because at the moment we can't do any more chassis upgrades because we need Spec 1 to do it. But as you can see, it's a long time until Spa, so we are having to do a fair few activities. And we do have about 1,200 resource points to spend, so we spend it on a drag reduction update in the aero department. We're about halfway in the field in the engine, about 2/3 down for the downforce and for the aero. But then chassis-wise, we are pretty much rock bottom, so that was why I wanted to go and get chassis up to Spec 1 so we can try and start advancing that forward a little bit. But we're into the race weekend now, and you can see the weather forecast was dry, so that's fantastic. And we've got Kimi Räikkönen is going to be retiring. So after next season, well, at the end of the season, we're not going to see him anymore. And we get confirmation of our development update in this chassis department there. So that is always good. And then progress-wise, we have dropped back to second to last because Alfa Romeo have jumped up quite a lot. And just as a recap, we are 8th in the driver standings with 38 points and 6th in the constructors. Obviously Stroll is 6th in the drivers, but that's because he was in the Racing Point. But Russell is now in the Haas because, yeah, obviously us taking Stroll meant that somebody had to go in the Racing Point, which was Grosjean. So Grosjean's in the other Racing Point, Russell's now in the Haas, and our old teammate Illot has ended up in the Williams. But I'll do the practice now and we'll go to qualifying. So the ultimate goal in qualifying is, I suppose, pretty much to qualify ahead of the Williams, because as you saw in the development chart, we are now only above the Williams and below everyone else. So Alfa Romeo got a pretty big development update by the looks of it, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're quite quick on pace in this race. And then the Haas is just below them, so we might be able to be on par with the Haas. So I suppose the ultimate aim is to qualify ahead of Haas, but probably not ahead of the Alfa Romeos. It'll be very interesting to see what our new teammate Lance Stroll manages to do. Hopefully he's a little bit closer to us than Illot was. I mean, in many races, Illot has actually qualified below George Russell in the Williams, so that's certainly not good for us. But let's see if Lance Stroll can do any better as we cross the line with a 1:44.077, which, after skipping forward a little bit, puts us in P15, and our teammate that did a 1:44.235. So that is actually a lot quicker than I imagine Illot would probably be able to do. Obviously in the Williams he's done a 1:45.3, but I didn't bother doing another run because I just wanted to save engine components really, because they're getting very worn. But that secures us a solid P17. which is pretty much where we should be. We're above Magnussen in the Haas and actually above one of the Alfa Romeos, Giovinazzi. So, yeah, pretty solid result, and we've got Lance Stroll alongside us on the grid.
Good day today. Let's have your take on it. Who would you say is your biggest rival at the moment?
Oh, here is the question. Now, I decided that, I mean, you know it is. It's got to be Ocon. It has to be. The amount of times I've said he's been a pain in our backside. And then for some reason they just ask us about Red Bull, so I just say, you know, they're a good legacy. Well, but we'll go to the race.
Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting race. Lewis Hamilton lines up on pole position, edging out Max Verstappen, who'll start from P2. Looking at the rest of today's grid, we have Perez, Ricciardo, Sebastian Vettel and Leclerc, Albon, Grosjean, Gasly and Daniel Kvyat, Bottas, Sainz, Esteban Ocon and Norris, Russell, Raikkonen, the engineer, and Lance Stroll, Magnussen, Giovinazzi, Illot, and Nicholas Latifi. It's almost time for those 5 red lights to go out. Then let's see who can prevail today.
You're going to have to push hard and early to give us any chance of a good result here.
So Jeff reckons we're going to be having to put in the effort to get a decent result here. Strategy-wise, we're doing a soft to medium on lap 8. And then fuel-wise, I just over-fuel us by about 0.8, so we can use a fair amount of rich. And it's 5 lights out, and we are underway. It looks like most people get a decent start, but we do skip ahead onto the onboard, and I don't know if you saw that, but one of the Hasses actually just dive-bombed into the back of Bottas and lost a fair amount of his wing, so I imagine he's going to be a bit slow. But you see, we're going along. We got the 2 Hasses side by side behind us with our teammates slotted in nicely behind them, and we are very much pushing on Bottas and Raikkonen ahead. We're using all the rich and all the overtake that we can, but they're side by side, so there's really no space for us. So we actually end up braking a little bit early, which allows Magnussen to climb into our gearbox and actually try and come alongside us there. And you can see he is pretty much trying to dive alongside us, but we squeeze him out and we just about hold on to the position. Looks like behind us as well, our teammate has got past the other Haas, but I imagine, well, that's Grosjean, so I imagine he's the one that smashed into Bottas at the beginning. So he's going to have a lot of wing damage as we go very, very, very wide, and that allows Magnussen to come alongside us and actually eke ahead a little bit. But we got the racing line, so we outbrake him a little bit as well, and that allows us to stay ahead as we go wide again, which allows him to go side by side. But we outbrake him, and we settle into P16 at the end of lap 1. And then going on to lap 3, we now have DRS enabled. We still have Bottas ahead. Somehow he hasn't managed to get past Raikkonen in the first 2 laps. We still got Magnussen behind as well. He's pretty close, 0.7, and then behind him is Stroll, about 1.5. Our new teammate actually sticking with us, which is quite good. If this was Illot, he'd end up be pretty much with the Williams at this point. And you see Bottas going for the move on Raikkonen, and he just about makes it work. Still side by side. Raikkonen's really giving the push there. Wants a little bit of a fight, but goes for it. We're gaining pace. We think about going for a move on Raikkonen, but it's just a bit too risky. We really don't want another DNF after having one last race. That's certainly not good for sponsor payout. That wouldn't be ideal at all. So skipping ahead to lap 4, you can see we are very, very steadily gaining on Raikkonen there. We're using all the overtake and all the rich mix that we can, and we actually make the overtake look quite easy. We do it way, way before the braking zone, so not really too much of an issue there. And we actually set a purple sector 1 for good measure, which is nice. We seem to have a yellow flag for some reason. If you look straight ahead, we've actually got Leclerc is out of the session. Some sort of technical DNF, but that allows us to gain a position and move up into P14. We've now lost the DRS on Bottas. He's 1.8 ahead, which allows Raikkonen to gain on us quite quickly. I imagine that upgrade of theirs must have been some sort of engine or drag or something, because he's pretty quick on the straights, and we're side by side through this entire section here, but I back off a little bit, don't want any contact, and it allows him to eke ahead, and he is now ahead of us. If we stick with him, we should be able to keep the DRS, so that is the ideal situation, and lockups like that certainly don't help, and that allows Magnussen to come alongside us going into this corner here. But we do still side by side actually. Going into this braking zone, once again we do outbrake him, and that allows us to stay ahead. An interesting thing as well, you do see that Stroll is still keeping up. He is only 5 tenths behind us, so it means he's about 2 tenths behind Magnussen. So he's properly keeping ahead in terms of pace. And we got another yellow flag. Looks like it's for one of the Williams. And it is. It's for Latifi. So Latifi is out of the session. That means there is a safety car. So yeah, it's quite a short VSC actually. Barely a couple of corners really. Annoyingly, the VSC ends in a braking zone, which is always quite difficult to make sure you're on the right delta for that. So we actually lose a little bit of time going through there. We've got Magnussen now about 5 tenths behind. So yeah, he's definitely sticking with us, and Raikkonen's like 2.7 ahead. So our plan of trying to stick in the DRS zone of him, it didn't work. As we cross the line going on to lap 8, a fair few of the guys ahead have gone into the pits, which allows us to take P10 by the looks of it. I saw most of them were going on to the hards. So yeah, they're clearly deciding that the hards is the best tyre to be going on. This is our in lap for our pit, so I do decide to go for a bit of a push lap. And obviously Magnussen went into the pits that lap as well, so we don't have him to worry about. All we've got behind us is Stroll as we dive into the pits. Well, more like crawl round the corner rather than dive. But we are now into the pits, and we do a 2.5 second pit stop, so not too bad. Certainly not as slow as our 3 second pit stop we got last race, but it does allow us to come pretty nice ahead of Magnussen actually, about 2.5 seconds. So we've gained a lot of time by staying out 1 lap. Magnussen is on the hards, and so is Gasly ahead. So clearly their race engineers have also decided that the hards is the best option tyre wise. We're definitely going to have a pace advantage on the mediums initially, but I reckon after 5 or 6 laps, with the mediums being worn a little bit quicker, the pace advantage is probably going to become a bit stale there and be on par with the hards at that point. And going into lap 10, behind us, we've got Raikkonen and our teammate Stroll pitted. And Raikkonen's come out, and we're actually half a second behind, which, yeah, we certainly must have gained a lot of time during those pit stops, because obviously, as you'll recall, before we pitted, we were 2.7 behind Raikkonen, so it actually allows us to gain a little bit of DRS on him. And you can see on the left, Magnussen, our gap to him has actually increased to 4.6 seconds, and we're setting green sector times all over the place. So yeah, these mediums definitely proving to be a pretty good race tyre there. And yeah, so on lap 11 we actually set our fastest lap of the race so far, so clearly showing the mediums have got the pace. And Bottas ends up coming out of the pits behind us. So I did actually look back on the race director after the race and discovered that Bottas had wing damage, so that's why his pit was slow, and he overtakes us easily. We don't actually fight it, so there's no point. We'll only lose time trying to fight against someone like Bottas, who's going to get past us eventually anyway. So moving on to lap 13. As you hear, Jeff is telling us that the car behind is currently catching us. It says 5 tenths, but we were a bit slow on the last lap, so it's more like 2 to 3 tenths a lap. But we are now out of the DRS of Raikkonen, so we don't have that to help us. And yeah, so the medium tyres are actually falling off a little now, so pretty much on par with the hards. But I'm not too worried, because you can see the timing screen, it's not like Magnussen is catching us at a rate of knots. We are pretty much keeping on par with the pace there. And yeah, if you look at the gaps behind, you've got Magnussen 2.9 and Stroll 3.9. So Stroll's still keeping up. He's still keeping up. It looks like he's got a bit of a battle with the Alfa Romeo of Giovinazzi behind. But yeah, at this point the mediums are getting properly worn. So yeah, we're getting a fair amount of understeer through a lot of the corners and quite a lot of locking up as well.
We expect the grip levels to start falling away soon.
And confirmation of that, Jeff's telling us the grip levels are falling away. Again, we've got that orange gearbox icon in the bottom right corner, telling us that our gearbox, or our engine more like, is pretty worn. So yeah, this is definitely going to be the last race for the majority of our gearbox components. You see, our control electronics unit is on 68%, and that's the thing that we changed in Austria. So in only, what, 3 races, that's got to 68%, which is insane, because you only get 2 of them for the whole season, which means we're going to have to take a grid penalty for one of those. So I might just stack them up and take a grid penalty for all of the components. So we'll end up definitely at the bottom of the grid, but we'll have brand new engine components. It's probably the easiest way of doing it. But you see, I'm fast forwarding through a fair few of the laps simply because it's the same thing. We're all on our own. We got Raikkonen now properly steaming ahead, 7.2 seconds. Magnussen is ever so slowly gaining on us, but nothing too major. And you see, going to the end of the last lap, the last straight, I actually do go for a bit of a push lap here to see if I can better my lap, because you can see it's a 1:47.4 at the moment. I've done a green sector 1 and sector 2. You've got Raikkonen 8 seconds ahead, Magnussen 2 seconds ahead. Giovinazzi 17th, so he's managed to get past Stroll, but that is to be expected. The Alphas are pretty quick this time round, but we do cross the line to finish in P15. And yeah, Hamilton wins the race with Verstappen second and Vettel third, so it's quite nice seeing Vettel on the podium. He actually started 5th on the grid, especially after the real-life Ferrari season, which certainly wasn't very kind to Vettel. And Bottas down in P9, so the championship fight between Bottas and Hamilton certainly didn't help him there. And we finished P15, and we did get a 1:46.8 in the end, so actually a fair bit quicker than our previous laps. And our teammate Lance Stroll ended up P18 with a 1:46.3, so he's actually a lot quicker than us in terms of best lap pace. Certainly not something you could say about Illot. And driver standings, that puts us down into P9, which, you know, is to be expected. We haven't had a points finish for a fair while. And then constructors puts us down into P7 as well. So overall, a decent day. No points, but you know, we're certainly not developed enough to be able to be contending for points unless you have the guys ahead going for 2 stops. That's the only time we can contend for points, really. But other than that, thank you very much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, all that fantastic action. Check the links in the description. They're very good. And yeah, other than that, that's it from me. Good night.